Hi everyone, it's Sir Todd. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so super excited for today's video because I have a very special guest. Today I have the honor of interviewing Chris Ulmer. Chris is a disability advocate, former special education teacher, and founder of Special Books by Special Kids, or SBSK, a nonprofit organization that promotes the acceptance of disabled people. Chris, thank you so much for being here and letting me interview you today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this.
So excited. Chris and I first met in November of 2019. We had a special lunch together and it was amazing. It was so fun. And you've been kind enough to stay in touch with me. And we've kind of developed a little friendship. And
Oh,
so
it's not little, it's a huge blossoming friendship that the whole world can see.
lifelong friendship for sure. And I'm just so honored to know like such a cool advocate like you. Chris has over 2 million YouTube subscribers. I'm sure if you're watching my channel, you know who Chris is. So it's pretty amazing that I get to have you on my channel.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored. I'm excited to be here today.
So I have a few questions for you. I have some pretty tough ones because I really want to know your opinion on a lot of things related to the disabled community. So
Yeah, definitely.
just get started. I thought a good one to start with was, how do you feel about terminology like person first, identity first language, the term differently abled? Because a lot of people have different opinions on these things. And I just kind of wanted your opinion as a non-disabled person who knows so much about the community. Like, how do you feel about these terms?
Yeah, well, I don't like euphemisms. Is that the word?
Yeah,
Euphemisms? I don't like euphemisms, first of all, like differently abled. I don't think disabled is a bad word. Well, it isn't a bad word. And when you skirt around it and use euphemisms like differently abled, then that places a negative connotation on disability when it shouldn't be there in the first place. As
exactly.
far as person first or identity first, it's really up to the individual. I know the disabled community as a whole, there's never going to be we all think this way or we all think this way because it's composed of many individuals. The the larger percentage of the community is starting to lean into disabled and identity first. And I think that's great. I
Mhm.
think that's an awesome thing. But there's also some people who don't want to go by that, and that's fine too. So I don't have an individual opinion when it comes to that. Whenever I'm interviewing somebody, I ask what their preference is, and I go ahead with that.
That's a good way to go. I think it is interesting because we are all like different people. So I think a lot of people just expect us all to have the same opinion. And it's true, like we're all going to have different opinions. It's not just like every disabled person thinks the same thing. And I find it tough when I'm like doing things where I'm speaking about our community because I prefer to say disabled. And so sometimes I'll just alternate between disabled or person with disability to try to like please everyone as best as I can. But I found like even with doing that, I've had people say, oh, we don't like disabled, we like people with disabilities. But then it's hard because I prefer disabled. So it's really difficult to try to please everyone there, I guess, when I'm like making my public posts. But I have found that most people seem to really dislike differently abled for so many reasons, because it does skirt around the term disabled. Like you said, it makes it seem like it's a bad word when it shouldn't be bad to call ourselves like what we are.
Differently able makes me cringe.
Me too.
But as far as people correcting you, that's something that will never go away. We have millions. If you combine like YouTube and Facebook and all the other social medias, I think we have something like 7 million people. So no matter what you use, there's going to be someone telling you you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that. Just do you. And yeah,
Yeah.
I want to put 2 seconds of thought on somebody correcting your terminology. But I found that sometimes people correcting me can be a good thing. I kind of look at it first from, is this feedback that I should be thinking about and, kind of changing myself based on this feedback? Or is this kind of somebody correcting my terminology where they haven't spent thousands of hours talking to disabled people like I have, and maybe they don't know, they don't have the same expertise as me. And
Right, like compared to other non-disabled people, you know so much.
Yeah, I would say that as far as non-disabled advocates go, I've gained quite a bit of knowledge and experience through talking to
Definitely.
disabled people. So yeah, always take feedback with a grain of salt.
Yes, for sure. So that actually leads me into my next question, which is what's the most valuable lesson you've learned from someone you've interviewed? Because I know you've interviewed so many people and I'm sure they've all left impressions on you in different ways. But I just think like maybe is there one thing that's really stuck out to you that you've learned?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people when they watch our videos and then they meet me in person, I think they expect me to be like some really wise guru because I've met so many people. But I don't really go into interviews thinking, what am I going to learn from this person or what does this person have to teach me? I do think that everybody in this world can teach you something. It's not like only disabled people can teach
Yeah,
us something or every disabled person is here to teach us something. That's not the case.
very true.
I think every individual in the world could teach us a lesson if we take the time to know them, whether it be one of the biggest CEOs in the country or your baker at the local cook. I think everybody has a valuable life experience we could learn from. As far as SBSK specifically, um, I think just talking to so many people, it's the
Mhm.
oldest cliche in the book, but you just never know what somebody's going through.
True. Like no matter if we have a disability or not, we're all going through something. And I
Hmm.
think that is something we all need to try to remember more because you're right. Like a lot of people seem to think that we disabled people have like more challenges than everyone else. And we definitely do have challenges, but like everyone has hard things in their life, so we're all dealing with something difficult and we should try to remember that more, I think.
Another thing, you're definitely right. And another thing I learned through SBSK is how willing people are to talk about deeper issues if
Mhm.
you give them the opportunity to. I think
Mhm.
often in society, a lot of like the conversation we have is kind of surface level. Did you see
Yeah.
the game? How about this weather? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a certain amount of that that's necessary for a society to function. But I also enjoy the deeper conversations, and I find that people are very willing to have them in the right environment.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I love having more like philosophical conversations, like with my mom and my friends all the time, like rather than just talking about, like the more superficial things. But yeah, like that is enjoyable too. But I do enjoy like getting to contemplate a lot of these like deeper things. And I do think having a disability enables that because I've had the chance to think about like my place in society and how like my disability affects my life. And so that's kind of opened the door for me to think more about those things. But yeah, I think you're definitely right that people are more interested in having those conversations when we're in the right space and we're comfortable with it. And we know that we're not going to be like judged.
Think also the fact that people reach out to me to interview them and they kind of expect those deeper conversations. It's not like, we're out at a restaurant and all of a sudden I'm like, what do you think the point of life is?
Yeah,
They kind of have time to emotionally prepare for it.
right. That's so true. So it's like the right environment. And you're super easy to talk to also. So I know you make everyone feel comfortable when you're interviewing them and everything.
Oh, thank you.
So let's see. My next question that kind of relates is what issues surrounding the disability community do you wish more people understood better?
I think it's just accommodations, giving disabled people access to everything they should have access to, whether that's housing, whether that's employment, benefits, healthcare. Yeah, I would say that's it.
I definitely agree because I talk a lot about how it's really like society that disables us. Because if there were more accommodations, we wouldn't technically be disabled. Like when I'm at college, I feel like I don't really have a disability because my dorm room was made like specifically for me. There's everything I need in there to live independently on my own. And I think people tend to focus too much on blaming the person and our body for the problem rather than the lack of accommodations in the world.
And it's so ingrained in the society that often we see examples of the opposite of accommodation and it's celebrated. Like you'll see a kid is denied access to a wheelchair by his healthcare company, and then the local science team builds him one, and that's great. Like that's a really kind deed from the science team that did that. But a kid should not have to be dependent on charity to have access to a wheelchair. That should be a human right.
Right, it definitely should, because a lot of people who use wheelchairs will say, my wheelchair is like my legs, and everyone else has legs, like they should be able to have access to their wheelchair. And that definitely is an issue too, with prices of mobility equipment and just medical devices in general being raised so much. Like I once bought this toothpaste dispenser to help me get my toothpaste out, and it was just literally a piece of plastic, and it was like $115 for a piece of
Jeez,
plastic. And I feel like
that's ridiculous.
yeah, and I think they just like jack the prices up because they know that we need these items and they're not really readily available, and they just think that they can take advantage of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry you have to go through that.
Yeah.
Access to education is another big one. You
Mhm.
take kids who, I don't know, for example, a diagnosis like autism. You take an autistic kid, and the teacher might not be equipped to teach that kid in a typical environment, so
Mm.
he doesn't have access to the environment anymore.
Yeah, right. And that's awful.
So
Like they,
creating more inclusive educational environments would be a big one for me.
yeah. And of course, you're going to know a lot about that, like given your background as a teacher, and that's going to be super important to you. And the school system definitely does have a lot to work on. I think I've noticed that more as I've gotten older, like thinking back on how it was done when I was in elementary school. Like I remember that there was a special education class like on my hall, and we just never really understood like anything about the class. Like we just always kind of seemed to in our minds separate those kids as like the other kids, because we were never
Mm-hmm.
taught how they were just kids like us. They just needed extra help with some things. They just needed accommodations. And I'm not exactly sure how that should be taught to young kids, like 5-year-olds, but I don't think ignoring that those kids, like ignoring the fact those kids exist is the answer. Because I just remember always feeling confused and not really understanding why there was a separate classroom.
Yeah, in a lot of schools, kids who need that additional help with education are put into a different room in the corner of the building, and they're there all day, and none of their peers or other teachers even acknowledge them, and that's a shame.
It's awful, because I think school could just become really isolating for those kids. They would feel like not as accepted, and that's really sad. So I hope that can change more. And I think with teachers like you, who obviously care so much about your students, and you gave them a way to share their story and like let their voices be heard, I think that could change.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is becoming more inclusive, so
Hmm.
there is societal progress. That's a good thing.
Yes. My next question, I briefly spoke about this a minute ago, but I love your take on it as well. Do you think it's more important to fight for a cure for conditions that cause disabilities, or eliminate societal barriers surrounding the disability, or both? Because I feel like we do place a lot of emphasis on finding a cure, and I think it's great to look for a cure, but we often forget that we should try to make the world accessible in the meantime.
Yeah, this is one of those questions where there's no one size fits all answer. With a
Mhm.
lot of disabilities, it's definitely best to approach it from the standpoint of acceptance. You're perfect just the way you are. We have to improve society and make it more accessible. I would say for the majority of disabilities, that's the appropriate mindset. But there are also disabilities, like I take my friend John, for example, who was born with, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, epidermolysis bullosa.
Mhm.
Whenever I'm doing an interview with John, I make sure to research the correct pronunciation of that beforehand. But it's been a few months since I talked to John, so forgive me if that's not correct. But
That's
anyway,
acceptable.
this diagnosis is often referred to as EB. John doesn't have the same things in his body that keeps the skin attached the same way we do. And from the time he was born, he came out of his mom and his skin was literally ripping off his body. And all he's ever known is pain, open wounds on his body. Every day he's just dealing with that. And I think about a diagnosis like that where the result of it is just John living with constant physical pain that's extremely severe every second of the day, and that's all he's ever known. When it comes to a disability like that, I think it's a good thing to be searching for a cure, of course. But
Definitely.
not every disability is EB. There's many different things. Like autism is a neurological disorder. I
Mhm.
think it's best to approach autism from a standpoint of acceptance and inclusion.
Me too. That's interesting because when I've spoken on this, I have had some people say, my disorder causes me so much pain and I really want to be out of that pain. And I can totally see that. And so I think as someone like me, I mostly am just dealing with my paralysis and the lack of independence because of that. I think sometimes I do struggle to see that other point of view and I need to consider that more. Like, of course, if I were in pain all the time, like I would definitely want to have people fighting for a cure. And then there's definitely disabilities that could be life threatening, where we would definitely want to find a cure because it would be awful to not focus on that when people could live their lives. So,
I think
yeah.
the best thing to do is to honor the wishes of the disabled person.
Hmm.
Like I would never, if somebody is looking for a cure, say, no, accept yourself, don't look for a cure, or vice versa. If they're not looking for a cure, and I think they should be, which has never been the case, but if in some hypothetical world where that is the case, I would
Yeah.
never try to correct a person. I think a person's wishes should always be honored.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good way of looking at it for sure. This is kind of steering us in a little bit of a different direction, but this is one thing I have talked about a lot. I've made a video on this for my channel too. And I just want to know what you think about the international disability symbol, just being a wheelchair user, and what that might make people think about who can be disabled and the problems that it causes.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't represent that so many disabilities aren't visible.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that people see probably multiple times every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had maybe a person in a wheelchair and a person who didn't physically look disabled standing beside them, it might be a constant reminder that, oh, yeah, that's right. I don't know the percentage, but there's a good percentage of disabilities that are not visible.
Right.
So, yes, I can definitely see how it would feed into a stereotype that all disabilities are visible.
Mm-hmm. It definitely does. I think it's interesting that that became the symbol in the first place. I think it's been the symbol for a while now. And it's accurate in some ways because, wheelchair users do need the extra space in the accessible parking spaces and the extra space in the accessible restrooms. But I have noticed that I feel like it just causes people to think like, yeah, the only disability is someone who uses a wheelchair. And there's so many conditions that could cause someone to need a wheelchair for one thing. But yeah, I think it definitely does leave out other disabilities. And I think if we had more education, we could have that as our symbol and people would not be as narrow-minded and they would realize that, that people use wheelchairs aren't the only disabled people. But I feel like if we had education in the first place, it never would have become the symbol because people would realize that that's not as inclusive as it should be.
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's a lot of people who don't understand that you can be severely disabled, yet it's not visible to the naked eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely underrepresentation there. And I've made some videos on this, like some funny TikToks about the accessible parking spaces and people being bold and like calling me out for using the space because I'm walking. Um, and a lot of people have commented saying they've dealt with the same thing. And it's so frustrating because they're walking, but people just don't realize that they have like a severe invisible disability.
Does that happen to you like on the regular every week?
No, not that often at all, but whenever I use the spots and I have my permit up, I just know people are looking at me, judging me, like wondering why I'm in the space. My mom and I have dealt with people at my old high school using the spots too, who we knew didn't need them. There was this parent who was using it to load her child's baseball team into the car.
Oh, wow.
And when we called her out, she said, "Thank you for your opinion." And a lot of people seem to think that the laws surrounding the spaces are like an opinion and you can just like choose to use it.
I'm gonna start using that. Chris, take out the trash. Thank you for your opinion.
Right. Right. That was her response. And then she turned her back to us and then she told us that she was loading tons of 8th grade baseball players.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people don't understand that not every disability you can see it, so they might not take what you're saying seriously because they don't realize you're advocating for yourself.
Right. Yeah. I think people just look at me, they see a young person and they're like, oh, why are they using that space? They don't need it. And I think it's interesting because this is the one time when it seems like many non-disabled people like care about disabled people, but it's not that they actually care. It's that they're just like jealous that we're using the spaces and they wish they could too. And they're exposing their own ableism in the process because they're not acknowledging that there are people with invisible disabilities.
I think I'm so ingrained within the disability community that it's hard for me to believe that some people just don't understand that there's so many invisible disabilities out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely I just don't think I would have realized that like if I didn't have a disability. And I think that's really shameful that like it's just there's not enough education on that. And I think I definitely would have known like disabilities like autism exists, but I wouldn't have thought about there being people like me like who can walk but have paralysis. And my disability is not really directly invisible, but it's not the most visible disability either. So I'm kind of in between there. But I think a lot of the stuff that I know, I definitely wouldn't know if I wasn't disabled for sure.
And that's sort of the reason that I started SBSK and videos interviewing people, because I realized there wasn't a resource out there
Mm-hmm.
for people to learn about different disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were just mentioning, even within the disabled community, there's so many various opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have one disability but not know a thing about hundreds of other disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So through these videos, I try to make them accessible and entertaining and interesting to both adults and kids. So no matter what age you are, you can watch them. And if you're a parent, you can watch it with your kid and you can learn, but you can also have a discussion with it about your kid, because there really isn't a lot of resources out there for kids
Right.
to learn about disability. I think they should be learning at a very early age.
I think so too, because like I said, I wouldn't know all these things that I know. And I don't think every person is, if they don't have a disability or if they don't know anyone with a disability, should be like experts. But I do think that people could definitely know more. And you are doing such amazing things. Like I'm sure you've changed so many people's opinions on like what it means to be disabled. And I'm sure you've helped people develop empathy towards the disabled community. And I think that's amazing.
Thank you. I love to do it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right. So this is kind of building upon what we were just speaking about, which is to you, what does it mean to be disabled? It's kind of become a form of an identity. And someone with one medical condition might consider themselves disabled, and another person with the same condition might not. So how do you feel about like what it means to be disabled?
Um, to me, it's just a word that identifies that you need an accommodation in order to have access to everything a person should have access to. Um, yeah, that's really what it means to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice way to to advocate that, hey, there's something I need here.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. I think it's also cool how it has become a bit of an identity. Like
Mm-hmm.
our disabilities are more than just our medical conditions, like they're part of who we are. And I definitely feel that way about mine. And I feel like it does relate to society and accommodations. And if I need accommodations or if I encounter barriers within society, then I'm disabled. Because, like I said, society is what disables us. It's not really directly my medical condition that disables me.
Yeah, and it's funny. I don't really consider myself an expert on disability at all. I consider myself an expert on creating positive environments, like in the classroom, where all students can thrive. And a lot of those students were disabled. So as far as, somebody watching this and hearing my definition of disabled, definitely like don't take that to the bank. Actually go talk to disabled people. My expertise is education. And also I feel like my expertise is also connecting with people and creating an environment where they feel comfortable sharing their truth.
Hmm. I think that's amazing. And I feel like you've totally done something revolutionary. Like you were a special education teacher and you turned it into so much more, and it's amazing.
Oh, thank you. I love teaching. Teaching was a lot of fun.
I'm sure. I feel like you would be such a great teacher. Like you're so calm and patient and definitely accepting.
Oh, thank you.
What's one struggle you've realized many disabled people go through that you weren't really aware of before you were a teacher and like before you met so many people with all kinds of disabilities?
Yeah. One of the questions I ask almost everyone is if there's a child who meets you and it's the first time they're meeting somebody with a disability, what would you want that child and their parents to do? And what I'm always surprised to hear is the amount of times a child actually does have a question. And instead of approaching that as a learning opportunity, the parent just pulls the kid away and says it's rude to ask questions. And that's not to say that everybody wants to be asked questions. There's some disabled people I met who said, oh, no, if I'm at the grocery store, I'd rather just do my shopping. I'm not here to teach somebody every time I go out. But I
Right.
can say more than 90% of the people who I've interviewed have said that they would love to take that time when the kid is asking a question and answer any questions the kid has to say. They don't ever consider that as rude. They love educating children. So I'm always surprised that adults and parents aren't willing to have those discussions. And that's probably because when those adults and parents were kids, nobody had those discussions with them and were never taught about disability.
Mhm. I think that's super interesting too, because as someone with like not a super direct visible disability, I don't really get a lot of questions from just random strangers because when I'm out and about, people don't really know that I have a disability.
Definitely. And I think there's definitely a difference between an adult probing and a child probing.
Oh, for sure. There definitely is. Like with kids, they're just curious and it's great that they want to learn more. And kids are generally more accepting than adults.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And they're more malleable. You can teach them something and it really changes who they are as a person. Whereas
Mhm.
an adult, we're kind of hardened and our perspectives are already formed.
Yeah, for sure. I've found that when I speak to kids versus like teenagers and adults, they are definitely more willing to learn and they're just more receptive to that. And I think that's great. Like their perspectives are being changed and challenged more like when they're younger. And I think that's where parents could help kids more, like when we see a disabled person in public, like their reactions can help that child learn more if they have the appropriate one. Like I've seen people say like don't just tell your child not to stare because then what is that doing to their opinion on disabled people? It's making them be like, oh, like they're different, they're like the others. Like it might like kind of scare them. And so we should start having a better reaction to our kids like around disabled people in public.
Definitely.
Because yeah, I just think it can create a bigger divide between the non-disabled people and the disabled people if we're just saying like, oh, don't point, don't stare. Like I saw on Twitter the other day, a wheelchair user said that he overheard a parent with their child talking about him, and the parent said, "Oh, maybe his legs just have, you know, a few problems. Maybe they just need a little extra help sometimes. You could go ask him more about it if he's willing to talk about it or something like that." And I thought that was a pretty good response.
I remember when I was teaching, I invited one of my students who's autistic out to practice with the soccer team I coached. And I coached a competitive travel soccer team of, I think it was like 12 and 13-year-olds. So these were all like, jockey kids who love soccer and were pretty good at it to make the team. And I just told them, listen, my student's going to come out. I want you to treat him like he's on the team. He's only practicing with us, but be his friend. His name's John. And he came out, and John is having the time of his life. He's jumping up and down, flapping his hands, doing the best he can, but he's kind of doing his own thing at the same time. And at first, the students, my players, didn't know what to do. They just kind of stared at him, and you could tell they had questions. And at this point, during the soccer practice, it wasn't my place to educate them on, oh, he's autistic. This is why he does that. This is why, because that would other him.
Right.
That would make him feel like he's not part of the group. So instead, what I did was model the appropriate communication so my students knew how to treat him, because they never saw a guy jumping up and down and not really listening to the coach. So they didn't know if they should be his friend. They didn't know if they should yell, come on, man, get in line, get in line. What are you doing? So I look at that as an opportunity for me to teach my other players how to treat John without doing it directly. I don't have to other him and be like, all right, guys, this is what we're going to do when John's doing this, because he just wants to be part of the group. So what I did was, yeah, John, I love how you're jumping up and down and flapping your hands. I love how you love soccer. That's awesome, man. So then the other players knew that they could accept him and they didn't have to try to correct his behavior, that they weren't going to get in trouble, because I always say we're a team, and if one of us does something, then all of us do something. So I think it's the adult's responsibility to model appropriate communication all the time, and also when it comes to disability.
Definitely. And I think you did a great job of including him there. Like, it would have been awkward and uncomfortable if you'd pointed out like him being autistic, because it would have made him feel different. And that might have created some challenges there.
Yeah, and I don't think it's my place to do so. It's his place to do so. That's why with SBSK, it's always people who want to share their story. It's people who reach out. You never force someone to share their story.
Yeah, because that wouldn't be the most comfortable environment there at all.
Can you imagine me interviewing somebody who doesn't want to be interviewed? Tell everybody your diagnosis. What's your disability? Yeah, that would be miserable.
That would be horrible. But it's great that there is this space that you've created for people who do want to share their stories. And you've given them a platform of 2 million people on YouTube, which is amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important for people to know that there's a lot of people out there who want to hear their story.
Speaking of that whole topic too, I've noticed that it seems like the disabled community is left out of a lot of the whole diversity conversation. And it's super great that we're in this whole era of wanting to accept more people and realize that we're all just human beings who, want to be loved. We're all just people. But I've noticed that disabled people often just get left behind there. And I just wanted to know your opinion on that. Like, why do you think that happens?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to have like an accurate representation of media, because I've met so many disabled people. Almost everybody I follow on social media is a disability advocate. So to me, it seems like disability is everywhere when it's such a big part of my life. So it's hard for me to know how much disability representation there truly is in media when it is such a big part of my life. But I remember the whole reason I started SBSK is because there was no representation, and that was in 2015. So if it's anything like it was in 2015, there's just nothing. And even as I've built SBSK with the many advocates I've met, I'm invited to have, dinner with people in Hollywood who are trying to make disability representation a big thing within TV shows. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle just to have a person, a wheelchair user on a TV show. You have to fight for that, yet alone other disabilities, which society hasn't seen represented yet in media. It's a very slow moving battle, I'll tell you that.
Which is so unfortunate and sad, because I think it just makes such a big impact on younger children who are disabled. Like, seeing someone who's like them being represented, it can let them know that they can achieve their dreams too if they see someone else doing it.
And I just don't understand why it can be looked at as anything but awesome to have a wheelchair user in a TV show. Yeah, so not only do you have to fight to have somebody in a wheelchair on the TV show, but then you have to fight again to have it actually be a person with a disability
Right?
representing that wheelchair
That's a
user.
big
It's
problem.
ridiculous.
It's a huge problem. Like, it's great that they want to have a disabled character, but then you're right. They have to fight for having an actual disabled person play that character.
Hmm.
And that's come up recently with the Sia film as well. I don't know if you've seen that whole controversy.
I did, yeah. I'm not that active on Twitter, but once in a while someone sends me something. They're like, "You have to check this out," and I was informed of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that going around, especially within the autistic community. People are really frustrated by that, and I think rightfully so, because it's so like hardly ever that there's actually representation, and then when there is, it should be real representation.
And I just think about how awesome it would be. Like I think about one of my former students or someone I worked at in that role of being the autistic person in a film like that, and I think about how amazing that finished product would be with that person as the actor. And then I think about me as a teacher, the different strategies, methodologies, the environment you could create that would help that person flourish as an actor. And it's just fun for me to imagine like
Mhm.
me on the set with one of my autistic students and helping them through the set and the filming for that day. I think that would be an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, I think that would be a really neat experience for them to get to experience that, for you to get to see them experience that, because that opportunity really is hardly there for our community.
Yeah, and then the end product of all the viewers seeing an actually autistic person on film would be incredible.
It would be like groundbreaking, I think, that community, and for people just to learn more about that community in an accurate way, I think would be amazing. And I'm so interested in learning more about other disabilities, and it can be difficult to find accurate information and find information from the people who actually have those disabilities too, because I feel like oftentimes there's parents who want to speak over their children who actually have the disability, and that can become a problem as well with the representation.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to center the disabled person, especially if it's a kid. Um, I do include parent perspectives,
Mhm.
but never over the disabled person.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to have their perspective included, to just give an accurate portrayal of how, like, yeah, this like disability affects the whole family oftentimes.
Mhm.
And I think it is good that you're being like real and honest about that, and doing it in a way where it isn't overshadowing the disabled person.
And I think the parents who reach out to SBSK tend to be more progressive parents.
Hmm.
And those are often the parents that are selected for an interview because just like I was modeling for my soccer team, the correct communication methods with my student, those parents often model correct parenting methods
Mm.
with their children. And I think about of if a parent newly has a kid recently who has a disability and they're trying to learn, oh, how do I help my kid flourish? And then they find one of our videos and a parent is modeling for them correct parenting methodologies, then they can learn from that parent who is doing it the right way.
Yes, that's so true. That's amazing to think about. Like, yeah, like this can help parents as well. And I'd actually never really thought about that. But that's so true. Like, they can get a good example for how to be an accepting parent to their disabled child.
Yeah, exactly. And then because of that, that kid might grow up learning that disability is a part of his identity and not something he has to hide away.
Right, which is so important. Like, acceptance and just knowing that you're fine the way you are. Like, we should just love like ourselves and learn to accept the things that we can't change, because they can often bring us like positive things in our lives. And I definitely view my disability that way. Like, I see it as more of a positive thing in my life, because I'm so grateful that I've learned so much from it. Like, even just like things like the importance of having captions on my videos, and video descriptions and image descriptions, and like braille menus and stuff like that. Like, I just love that I'm aware of these things, because I think it's really important.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
For sure. Like as a learning experience instead of as something to be sad about.
Yeah, definitely. Life will be a lot better if you have that mentality.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So this actually leads me into my final question.
Ooh.
I saved this one for last on purpose. I think it would be good for you to help leave my viewers with a little bit of advice. So, as a non disabled person yourself, you've worked to raise awareness for the disabled community and you've helped our voices be heard. So, in your opinion, what's the best way that other non disabled people can be allies and support the disabled community?
No, just do what I do. Shut up and listen.
I love that. Shut up and listen. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and we give the a platform to millions of people to shut up and listen to. Maybe not the platform. We give the opportunity to millions of people to shut up and listen to disabled advocates.
I love that. That's amazing. You should like put that on a shirt.
Shut up and listen. That quote only works in certain situations, though.
That's true. That's so great. And I think that's amazing advice because it is
Oh,
a
look, my Noodle just walked in the door.
Oh, Noodle. Hello, Noodle. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. Star of the show. Hello, Noodle.
She literally just opened the door. I don't know how she did that.
SBSK mascot.
Yes, she is, definitely.
So cute. Well, I think that's great advice for the non-disabled allies and people who just want to support the community. Shut up and listen.
Shut up and listen.
Great advice for my viewers. So this has been amazing. I've learned so much from you. I'm always learning from you and the people you feature on your channel. I think that you're an amazing person. You're easily one of the coolest people that I know. And this has just really been an honor to interview you. And thank you so much for being a guest on my channel. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've seen your channel grow a lot in the past year, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see it keep on growing. I'm sure it's going to.
Thank you. It's been so much fun, like during quarantine when I was bored. I really appreciate all the work you put into yours now because I know how much work it is now, like filming and then the editing, especially. It's so much work.
It is. I mean, every video for SBSK before this year, I filmed with people all over the world, mostly in the USA. So any video and they're 10 minutes, takes about all in about 50 hours, even
Mm,
more if you include travel time and time spent in
right.
hotels. And
That's so true.
mhm.
Yeah, it's really a big effort. It is a job for sure, full-time job for people like you.
It is. I mean, it takes the same time as a full-time job, but I would never call it a job because,
Because you love it so much.
yeah, I've been doing it for 6 years now, and I feel like I've been unemployed for 6 years. All my friends joke. They're like, oh, he's a bum. He doesn't have a job because it doesn't feel like I have a job. Yeah, I'm working 60, 70 hours a week, but I love doing it.
Well, that's great because you want to love what you do and you're impacting other people while doing what you love.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I feel very fortunate that I get to do it with my life.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And you're changing so many people's perspectives. And the disabled community is really lucky to have someone like you advocating for us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this was amazing. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you. I'm sure my viewers have learned a lot from you. So thank you, Chris, for letting me interview you. This was amazing. Everyone, you should go check out Chris's channel, but I'm sure you already have if you're on mine. But if you haven't, I will leave his channel link in the description of this video. Definitely go check out his channel and be sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. I try to post every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern and sometimes Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. So I hope to see you at my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, everyone.